Very funny.
We now give you our brand new little sweetheart of swing.
Welcome to Stay Tuned, the show for animation lovers, recorded live on YouTube and proudly streaming on Patreon. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, I'm your host, Phil Machi. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on this premiere episode of 2019. Tonight, Stay Tuned starts the new year off with something new. The first part of a 3-part music series. My special guest is composer Lolita Ritmanis. All that, and you'll have a chance to share your thoughts, questions, and opinions with me for a live Q&A after the show. My special guest tonight is a 10-time Emmy-nominated composer who won for her work on Batman Beyond. Since that time, she has created music for a number of direct-to-video films for both DC and Marvel, including Batman: The Killing Joke and Young Justice: Outsiders. Representing 1/3 of Dynamic Music Partners, Lolita Ritmanis is here to get musical with me in just a few moments. But first, this. Direct-to-video films and TV series. Had to make that correction. Lolita Ritmanis, welcome to Stay Tuned.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure it is to be on your program.
It's a real honor to have you here, for sure, for me.
Honor is mine.
Thanks. You've become a real tour de force in the DC Comics world. I'm going to get started right off the bat with jumping into DC because I'm such a big fan. Were you always drawn to those characters, or did all of this start with Batman the Animated Series?
Honestly, with the exception of watching the old Batman, the live action Batman with the jazzy score when I was a kid.
Adam West, yeah.
Adam West, of course. I definitely kind of happened into this because of my mentor, the late Shirley Walker. So that's how it all started for me. It was actually my first screen credit as a composer. I'd been working a lot as an orchestrator for other composers and doing arranging and orchestrating, and always wanted to be primarily a composer, but was doing all the other jobs to get me to that point. And Shirley opened the door for me on BTAS, which it's such a crazy thing to get that kind of a opportunity without any real big credits of my own.
Absolutely. So that was your foot in the door, and then you never looked back since.
I didn't, and it's kind of nuts because, there's been a lot of Batman, that's for sure.
Yeah, there actually has. I do want to get back to Shirley, but before I do, that feeds right into something I've been wondering. How hard is it to recreate a theme for a character that has had so many themes, arguably themed by yourself, I'm sure?
Well, to keep it fresh, we really, generally look to whoever the showrunner is, whoever is the main visionary force behind the particular incarnation of that Batman show. So, if Bruce Timm is doing something, he might have a real specific vision of, he wants it to be big orchestral sounding, and flash forward to Batman the Brave and the Bold, which was, James Tucker's baby, and that was, it was all about the bongo drums. So, it's working on Young Justice now, which is 5 years after it went off the air, to be on season 3 of a completely different sounding DC universe with a lot of kind of cool sound designy things. So, my hat's off to the gang at Warner Brothers for understanding the importance of allowing music to have its own voice as part of their creative process. I do think it sets everything apart in a very kind of classy way to have a unique voice.
That is true, and for as much grief as I've given them off camera, I have to say, like, I agree. Warner Brothers has been very honest and truthful to how they treat their scores. It's been nice to see they give that music a place to live. They allow people to purchase that music, which I know that might sound like not a big deal, but to me, that's huge that you can go out there and find the music at all.
Well, it's been really amazing to meet the fans of these shows over the years, whether it's at Comic-Con or even just online, that truly understand. They pick apart these scores. They know things about my music that I don't even know.
Oh, no.
They followed things through from an initial idea to like, oh, and then you use that same theme in this episode. And it's like, wow, it's amazing that you kept track of all that. I had even people that came up to me it was either Comic-Con or WonderCon, and a young couple that had gotten married to one of the cues from Justice League Star-Crossed, the end of the movie.
Wow.
They had actually taken the music off of the aired network broadcast and used it to get married to. So
that's got to be quite the honor, I'm sure.
It was amazing. This couple that were like, they were super, super skinny. It was kind of like, they almost looked like anime characters, with like very thin, with like really beautiful big features. And they're telling me they're getting married. And I'm thinking they got married to this music of mine. And I just, I was thinking, it's like some sort of a dream or something. It's so flattering. It's just, I had to, come down and off the ceiling after that.
How strange. Yeah, that's a cool idea though.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Young Justice. Of course, I have to jump on that because I am a huge fan of that show. How big of a shock was it for you to hear that come back now?
Well, here's the deal. Those fans they are the most amazing fans, period. And throughout those years, Michael McCuistion, Christopher Carter, and myself, which, we're the three of us comprised are known as Dynamic Music Partners, we've been steadily working with various superhero properties and kept in touch with Greg Weisman, who's one of the producers. And he does a lot of the convention circuit. And from time to time, there would be, a panel about something and Young Justice. All these different things and Young Justice. And when we'd be on these panels, the Young Justice fans, as soon as you mentioned that show, they just went nuts. And so the constant writing to Warner Brothers and just amount of whatever it was when it was on Netflix, was like, just like, keep watching it, binge watch. And it's like, okay, it makes sense, and fans are clamoring for more. Why not? The third season is going to premiere, I said January 4th. It's early January.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so good. I can't reveal anything about it other than to say it's pretty amazing.
And it's going to premiere on that on the DC Universe streaming app, which is one of those things where I'm so happy that exists. I'm of course a subscriber of it, but it's one of those things where this is not an animated thing, but when I started watching the Titans show, one of the things that I was thinking was, man, this is really good. And nobody's going to see it. I don't mean that really, but I hope people jump on board is what I'm trying to get. I hope that.
But the numbers are from what I've heard, the numbers are good, and some people, of course, are doing like, oh, we're only going to start subscribing right before Young Justice does it, and we'll just do it long enough and then leave. But I think all the extras that are available and all the little perks of being part of that, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg as far as what's going to be happening with all of our viewing habits. And for people that are true fans, I mean, why not immerse yourself in something like that?
Yeah, I agree. It's a great app. I mean, they went really in depth with everything they've done. When you watch one show, they bring up like, oh, so here's some other things about the characters. Here's an article about Robin that you might not have known about, which I think is such a in-depth and great way to handle it.
Yeah, well, I certainly encourage your listeners to check it out because it's, why not be on the forefront? I mean, I remember when Netflix first started, well, maybe it started earlier, but I remember getting into House of Cards and thinking like, okay, I don't know, how long is this going to last where people have to subscribe to something? And it's like, look at what happened with that,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, Netflix started out as a service where you mailed in and got a disc in the mail. So, I mean, we've definitely, we've come a long way. You mentioned your two musical partners. Is that, I can't really think of another instance where there are three people other than the studio of Hans Zimmer, where I know that he has people kind of working underneath him. But you guys kind of work together as a collective. Is that a pretty unique thing, would you say?
Well, I think the unique part of it is that there's no one main person. It's the three of us, and we did that for several reasons. We didn't want to start doing needle drop and librarying, reusing a bunch of pre-recorded material. We wanted to keep the tradition of really scoring each episode alive. And if we had not band together, it could have kind of been a situation where one person is really busy killing him or herself getting the work done, and the other two are kind of waiting for the next opportunity. So we decided to join forces in that sense. And as far as other examples of that in the business, I would say the majority of high-profile television composers now, almost all of them have a team. I mean, people that I have great respect for. I mean, Bear McCreary has many composers working under his guidance. Sean Callery, Chris Leonards. I mean, of course, the authenticity and the brilliance of those composers as just solo composers. I mean, they're outstanding composers. But to meet the deadlines and to get the amount of work done that is gone through those different production houses, really, they've kind of become these big companies in a sense. You need to have more hands on deck. So with our situation, the producer or director, whoever is our main creative visionary that we're working with, that person gets to meet all three of us and have 3 times as many laughs and 3 times as many, oh my God, I can't believe you did that, and that kind of thing, So we're a built-in test audience of the product.
It's fantastic. I think it's like, you're right. There is a lot of work involved. I don't think people realize, because the DC productions, I don't think there are a lot of other productions out there that are doing full orchestra-based work. Is that correct?
Well, not all of this is full orchestra. I mean, Young Justice is very much a kind of a sound designy, interesting, different kind of aspect to scoring. Some of the direct-to-videos that myself and my partners have done, and also Frederick Wiedemann, who was on your podcast as well before.
Yep.
It's you have a certain amount of live instruments, and then you have your instruments that are in your studio, orchestra in a box, I say.
Right.
Back in the old days, it was there was no such thing. So everything was hand composed, pencil and paper, score paper, and then you'd have a music copyist writing out all the parts, and then you'd have the orchestra come and play. And it's rare to have that be only the case, to have only orchestra, but definitely the sensibility of scoring each episode as far as telling the story and having different instruments and different themes and following the story arc if it's over an entire season. It really comes to life when you have more traditional composers, and traditional, I mean storytelling composers, as opposed to just, needle drop, use a library thing.
Oh, okay. The needle drop, you mean like in terms of Ren and Stimpy, where they had the music library, they could pull old songs and kind of give them new life again?
Yeah, I mean, needle drop it certainly is one option, but you're not going to get that unique sound. It's pretty much like, okay, all of a sudden you go from the William Tell overture played by a full, band to, going to some sort of indie rock piece of music within seconds, and so it's not kind of a cohesive style, but it's, it all has its place, and hopefully more of the young filmmakers will choose to go more the tried and true way of hiring a composer to score their project.
Before we go away from Young Justice too much, you mentioned that you guys kept the spirit of it alive, but as far as the creative aspect of writing music for that world again, how easy was it to reinsert yourself into that?
Well, surprisingly, it was pretty easy, but it did require a little bit of like, okay, let me listen to the first soundtrack. We had a release of the first soundtrack from the first 2 seasons, and just kind of get into that world again. And because of the characters and the stories being so deep and complex, it's rewatching a few episodes. I mean, not to say that the other DC properties aren't complex; they're just complex in a slightly different way.
Yeah, Young Justice borderline is convoluted a little bit. Like I mean that in the kindest possible way. Like, if you miss an episode, you are done on that show.
Well, but then luckily with everything being digitally available at your fingertips, you don't have to miss an episode. It's not like the old days of, like wait till Friday at 7:00 and sit down and watch.
But that's when I watched Young Justice when it first came out. I remember it being like that, and I was thinking like, my gosh, these are complicated storylines. I don't even know what happened a week ago.
Yeah.
But they're good. They're very good storylines. I'm not knocking them. Yeah. I've often said the work done on some of these direct-to-video projects that you just mentioned, that they're theater-worthy. So how exciting was The Killing Joke for you guys? And did you not realize it would make it to theaters? Did you know going into it they were going to do that?
I did not know that it was going to go into theaters. And actually, when, the whole Fathom event thing was happening, and we actually, I had seen it, but to see it with an audience, a very, very critical audience, but, a wonderful audience. It's like, they love it, they hate it, they love it, they hate it. But for the most part, just the excitement of being part of something that huge. And they also, had produced a little music featurette to go with it, which was kind of fun.
Yes, they did.
And it was really cool because one of our first meetings with Bruce Timm about that movie was the whole thing about that song in there. It's like, what? There's going to be this song, and it's called "I Go Loony." I mean, what a kind of an odd thing amidst all this dark, crazy stuff.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm not using expletive, but it's like it's very, very, very cool to kind of have something so dramatically kind of 180 degrees musically from what the darkness of that particular project was. And Mark Hamill, of course, you feel like you have to kiss the ring when you're in his presence. I mean, my gosh, it's just
no kidding.
I mean, what a great guy too. Just so sweet and professional beyond measure.
Well, you can absolutely tell that he took the role so seriously. I would say more seriously than he did even in the animated series. And that featurette you're talking about, Madness Set to Music, which is available on the Blu-ray. It's great. I love that we can see you and Michael and Christopher all sharing your experiences working together on a project that you clearly respected the source material of, regardless of what the fans feel about The Killing Joke. I would say the creative aspects of the music and the voice acting, you guys really were true to the spirit of that very, very dark and disturbing piece.
It was really spectacular to work on that. And we decided early on to hire, a string orchestra to add to the creepiness, to have these wonderful live musicians. And another thing for us emotionally, which was kind of an intense thing, was we didn't realize that we were actually recording our score on the same day, to commemorate. We didn't know we were commemorating the passing of Shirley Walker. It was like we're scoring the same day. And a lot of the same musicians played on The Killing Joke that had actually played on Batman, the animated series.
Oh,
so
man.
The whole, a very intense, and also her son, Ian Walker, was one of the bass players, string bass players. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was a remarkable day of great recording, and I just loved it. I loved the cinematic feel of it all. And I mean, as much as I love animation, I say this with the kindest of intention. When I forget about the fact that it's animation and just completely get immersed in the story, that's where I feel like it's risen to a whole nother level, where I'm not looking at, how is this painted, or how is this, are the backgrounds cool on this, or all the different sound design stuff. It allows me to immerse myself as a fan into the story and into the brilliant voice acting and writing and stuff. So.
Yeah, there are absolutely what you just said is true. There are moments in The Killing Joke where you just sort of forget what you're watching and you just get drawn in. And I think part of that is credit to the music that you guys created, which, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but unlike, more traditional themed based scores, there's just a lot of unsettling strings that comprise the score for Killing Joke, right?
Yeah, all three of us have a lot of experience with kind of traditional orchestral techniques and how to get those effects with live musicians. We know how to do that, and to actually then have the budget where, you're actually having musicians do that, as opposed to looking for some sort of samples and music sample libraries, but to actually know that, this is something that maybe a technique that Jerry Goldsmith used or Bernard Herrmann used, and bring that knowledge into our score is really very exciting.
Yeah, you guys created a mood for sure. I can attest to that. Oh, you mentioned Shirley Walker. I never had a chance to speak with her. How was your experience working with Shirley?
Well, when I started working with her, I was a very full of energy, nervous, excited, everything under the moon, composer, with just thinking about being terrified at the opportunity of working for her and with her. Then shortly before she passed, we had become colleagues. So I lament the fact that she's not around so much, because I would love selfishly just to be able to pick up the phone and complain about things or share my greatest triumphs. I mean, she was the best cheerleader, and she was also tough as nails at times. When I started working for her, it was very much in the mode of being an apprentice. It was mentor-student relationship at first. No questioning her what she would, if I had an assignment, it was like, there's no questions, you just do it. And that's what I really needed as I was starting out. To Warner Brothers' credit, Doug Frank was head of music at the time, and he very much accepted this idea that she was going to be bringing in emerging talent to give that talent a chance to shine and also to mentor. And a lot of people went through that kind of unofficial program of hers. Then just a few of us kind of survived that in a way, and were able to reap the benefits of just her embracing us as unique composers, with our own voices. So she's been gone quite a while now, and I am so lucky. I always mention her because I certainly wouldn't be where I am now without her, and her generosity and her spirit and her just amazing ability to just get things done, and in the face of being really one of the only women that had reached a certain level in this business, it was difficult for her at times because of that, but she did not publicly ever complain about that. She just pushed forward with it.
That's incredible. I just want to remind people, Batman the Animated Series, which is, of course, the work that we're referring to here, was very much character-driven and theme-driven, and she absolutely is just as responsible to that as Bruce Timm or any of the other artists that were on the show, because when you hear the Joker's theme play when he comes on screen, that is just as much an indication to start grinning as Mark Hamill's voice coming out of him.
You're very right, very correct. And it's interesting now to look back, because when you're in the midst of working on something that is quote unquote just a show, and you're just working and just going day to day, you don't realize the idea when we came up on the big, was it 25 years or 20 years, some big anniversary, and it was just this, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I was so lucky. What a crazy thing to be involved in so early in my career, to have that opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds like, that is, I'm sure anybody listening who's in music is a little bit jealous at the moment of that.
Well, I totally get it.
Is there a universe or a project in particular you wish could have lasted longer because you enjoyed working with the themes you created so much?
Well, everything, of course, you always want something to go on. When it ends, it's kind of a bittersweet thing. A couple things come to mind. Definitely working with Glenn Murakami on the original Teen Titans.
Oh, yes.
Glenn's Teen Titans. Teen Titans Go is so popular, but that's a different thing. Even Michael Jelinek is on Teen Titans Go, but Glenn's Teen Titans, when we started that, and he is such an interesting person to work with, because he really wants to draw out that creative kind of uniqueness. He wants to see what you'll come up with without telling you what he wants. He kind of opens the door for creativity. So I would have loved for that to have gone on. And also another property, which is not DC, was Spectacular Spider-Man. That only lasted 26 episodes, I think, because it was a Sony thing, and there was just that, it happened right as the whole Disney
the acquisition
Marvel thing. And so I think there were so many stories left untold, and that also is a critically acclaimed series that kind of just ended, and that would have been cool to have more of those. So.
Well, that's an interesting point that it ended around that time. I have to wonder, did it end because of the acquisition, or was it because of something else?
I think it was mainly that. It was kind of like things were in limbo, It was, kind of, it's hard to just, I think it's hard to order a bunch of new episodes of something if there's a whole big transition happening. So maybe, who knows? Everything's possible, right?
Everything is possible. You're right.
Again, the power of the fans. If you think about how a lot of that stuff happens, they get reboots or reimaginings, or just somebody will realize that, oh my gosh, there's this version of this property that wasn't fully realized because of some business dealings, and now it's possible to do it. So the fans should never feel like their voice isn't powerful. The fan's voice is hugely, hugely powerful.
This is very true. This is the age of the fan, and if you're listening out there, Gargoyles fans, I'm talking to you. That's one of the most passionate groups of fans I think out there. So you've won an Emmy, and you've actually been nominated 10 times, which is like an incredible achievement. But you won one for Batman Beyond, which I absolutely love that show. I watched it on its first run around. Does that put a lot of pressure on your creative process going forward with the new work?
I don't think it puts pressure on it. It just, honestly, it's just plain and simple. It felt really good to win, you know? It was, you know, not to say that, it was Shirley and Chris and Mike and I. So we, the four of us won for Batman Beyond. And I mean, for me personally, my first nomination was kind of like, all of a sudden like winning the lottery. And that was on Superman for Little Girl Lost, an episode of Little Girl Lost. Okay. It was a solo nomination. And that score I had worked so hard on every single little detail. It's like, for me, it's still I think it's one of my best works. And to be nominated for that, I mean, I was just beside myself. And it was the whole thing like, oh, then what are you going to wear? And what are you going to do? So I was so excited. And so then, to not win and a few other nominations to not win. And then to win for Batman Beyond, we were just, I was just kind of flabbergasted and so excited.
So do you ever go back and listen to, like you said, Little Girl Lost? Do you listen to your own work?
I don't really listen to my work like, oh, I'm going to listen so much for enjoyment. It's more like, sometimes putting together a reel to submit for, consideration for another project. I'll look through some of the past recordings and just try to find something, just for audition purposes. And then I'll stumble across something. And it's almost like this thing where, when you look at an old picture of yourself and you remember how you felt when you were in that picture. Like there are pictures where I'll look at an old picture and I'll think, oh, I thought I was so cool back then. And then I look at the picture and it's like, I wasn't really that cool, or vice versa. Or you'll remember a picture where you think, oh gosh, I really felt fat in that picture. I remember I was 13 and I felt so ugly, but I don't look so ugly. So music is the same thing, kind of, where you go back and something that maybe kind of was just something you wrote, it's like, this is actually really good. And then something that I thought was, it was the bee's knees. It's like, this isn't even that good. It's derivative of other stuff. It's not really happening. So
it's so interesting. I have to say that's very similar to the creative process that I deal with, the visual stuff with the comics that I do. I can look at an image and just start to hate it. And then I'll put it away for a long time and I'll find it again and I'll think, why did I hate this so much?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. It's just the human. I think as artists, we are generally very critical of ourselves.
Yeah.
And just the idea of, when you finish something and you've reached that deadline and you have to turn it in, you just kind of let it go and just let it be. And, it is just very much a collaborative business. You can't be so precious about everything. It's all up for change. And if somebody rejects something, it doesn't mean that it's not a good piece of music. It just maybe doesn't fit the scene the way that the director the producer, whoever's the person you're working with, wanted. So I think personal critique is the hardest, really. But the next thing that's difficult is finding a way to sustain a career and not be so dependent on what people think. You figure if they hire you, they hopefully basically like what you're doing.
Right.
You're not just a real jerk to work with if you're not, if you don't shrivel up every time somebody asks for a change or or have a tantrum about that idea of like, changing one single note, it's you're going to do okay.
That's a good point. That's a good point you bring up because I'm definitely coming at this conversation from a solo artist. I don't have an editor looking at the comics that I make and telling me what to change. So it very much is me against myself. But you're right. You are working in an industry where it's a collaborative effort. So yeah, I imagine it is a very different feeling overall.
Yeah, and it's, you can't really define your self-worth by what other people think of you. You can, but you're going to get sick, really. You're going to get stomach cramps or whatever. So you have to try to find a way to do your best work and then let the collaborative process just take it to wherever it needs to go. And if some of, your work doesn't get accepted, but you still are working, that means that you've been a good collaborator, a good team player, and a good, somebody that people enjoy working with.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite superhero that when you see you've got a project with them on the list, you're like, yes, I love writing for this guy or girl?
I genuinely love Batman.
Yeah.
I love the darkness and complexities, of Bruce Wayne, and then just the idea that you can actually do good and still not necessarily be this sunny, full of light person,
Thank you, Lolita, for being here with me today and talking with us about all the things that people may not think about when they hear, film score music.
It's always fun to talk to people who appreciate it. And, if anyone ever is interested more in the music, you can absolutely get a bunch of these soundtracks at La La Land Records, or also, through Water Tower on iTunes. And it's great. If any support for the music is really touching to me. And I appreciate the shout out today.
Of course. Is that the best way that people can support you if they want to make sure that Lolita gets as much support as she possibly can? Do they just go to those two websites?
Well, I would say this: if you like the music, if you don't like the music, don't say anything. No, when you're commenting on these fan sites, it's always great to at least to be noticed. I think if somebody likes something, it feels good. People often don't comment, and that in a way that's a big compliment. It means that we've made, I as a composer have made you feel something, but you don't even know why. So you didn't even notice that I made you more scared, or made you, happy about the heroes arriving or whatever. So I'd say any mention is great, and just keep watching the properties. That's really your support. It means the world. So
awesome. Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that nobody had a problem with the Killing Joke because of the music.
Great.
Well, thanks again, and have an awesome career going forward with the new Young Justice. We all look forward to checking out those episodes.
Fantastic.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
That was a selection of score from Superman the Animated Series titled Little Girl Lost, composed by Lolita Ritmanis. The series ran for 3 seasons starting in 1996. It followed Batman the Animated Series and featured much of the same creative team from that show. The long-anticipated 3rd season of Young Justice landed this past week exclusively on the DC Universe streaming service. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Special thanks go out to Lolita Ritmanis once again for joining us here on the show. Thanks so much to all of you listening in live on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you would like to support Stay Tuned and listen anytime, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/Philmachi to become a subscriber today. Among the cool rewards available there, you can also stream this show anytime you like, which means never missing an episode. For more fun, check out my original comic books at retailsunshine.com, and you can interact with me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under the handles of both Retail Sunshine and Philmachi. Also, you can keep up to date with the latest animation news by visiting this show at facebook.com/Stay Tuned Show. I've been Philmachi, you've been a wonderful audience, and until next time, keep those eyeballs peeled, those ears open, and be sure to stay tuned. Hey, anybody getting a case of deja vu? Because I sure am. Anyway, welcome to the after party. This is the real one this time. Yay, the real after party, he said, hoping that nothing would go wrong with the technology he uses again. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. So I mentioned something on social media tonight. I mentioned that there's a possibility I was going to share some behind-the-scenes animation stuff, because this is a show about animation, right?